The second season of Ryan Murphy's feud anthology, FEUD Capote vs. the Swans, Episode 5 transported us to November 1975 and showed us what happened the day after the Esquire story was published. After receiving a visit from friend and fellow writer James Baldwin, Truman Capote struggled with sobriety and resumed writing as he was entering a very dark period. At the end of the episode, Capote was eating a real swan that had been stolen in the middle of the night from Central Park and cooked by a budding chef. The conflict between Capote and Gore Vidal in Episode 6 stems from Capote's incessant alcohol consumption and his inclination to act as a court jester on primetime television. It's evident that his drinking has started to impact all of his relationships. Although Kate Harrington, née Kiriyoshi, may find it amusing to dress her up as one of his swans, the young aspiring model is growing more and more worried about her new father figure getting wasted. A feeling echoed by Richard Avedon, who chastises Capote for allowing it all to get to him, after removing all Truman had done to make Kate seem matronly, to really look like Babe, and taking some amazing portraits. But all Truman hears is Avedon encouraging Kate to dance for his camera, saying, "Youth is movement," with a smile on her face. And so Truman does, trying to reclaim some of his youthful exuberance and style at Studio 54 with CZ, who isn't quite as into the whole thing, no place to sit. Nevertheless, an increasingly drunk Capote has realized that, despite his literary career taking a hit, he is still a well-known figure. Vidal enters the picture with a highly enjoyable one that the American public thoroughly likes on their television screens and in chat programs. Capote shares a particularly graphic story about the Hollywood and the city and the Pillar novelist during one of those interviews. It was actually a Playboy interview. The story revolves around his being expelled from a 1961 White House event for intoxicatingly touching then First Lady Jackie Kennedy. The encounter alone is embarrassing for a writer from the wealthy political class. The fact that it is being revealed by another gay writer whom he has long hated is a bridge too far. Vidal files a lawsuit against Capote. If the person who told Capote the story came forward, the issue could be resolved, but they wouldn't consider it. Lee, who is obviously very resentful of Truman, chooses to act as though she had never heard of her sister's story, let alone relate it. She tells the other swans that she would prefer not to become involved. "There are just two guys fighting," Lee says sarcastically, and 70 was made to deliver the remark that makes CZ react. "We owe them a modicum of respect. The homosexuals, I mean." She's speaking with Babe, who may be slightly persuaded by CZ's viewpoint, but who also recognizes that both men and women, including themselves, are in a difficult situation. When allyship conceptions were obviously shifting in the late 1970s, possibly too quickly for the folks shown in Feud, this was a hot topic of conversation. You need look no farther than The Gays and Their Friends Between Revolutions, a 1977 graphic novel manifesto by Larry Mitchell and Ned Asta, which drew out the highly problematic relationship between men, gays, and women, among other things. At one point, it says, the women did not trust the guys for 1,000 years. They would let the guys arrange their hair into intricate, lovely designs. They would let them have soft textiles and carved wood around their homes. At their parties, they would permit them to perform music. However, they could not trust males. Thus, they did not have faith in the fags as they only knew them as men. Feud is making this point. The delicate relationship between homosexual guys like Truman and gorgeous women like Babe or CZ serves as the foundation for the entire story. By the tacit and yet rigidly maintained amity that appears to have prevailed, and maybe still does, between these two social groupings, whose predilection for the shallow, the vapid, or the feminine in general is needlessly disparaged by society at large. As they headed by gloves, Feud nudges us to notice how stupid Babe and CZ are, and Capote correctly notes that he might have been interpreted as little more than an accessory, a cute fluffy Pomeranian, no less. The secret to realizing how the falling out between Capote and his swans truly heralded a change in power and style is to grasp the way misogyny and homophobia are intertwined in their feud. There's a time to bow out, which is why CZ feels awkward about traveling to Studio 54, let alone getting photographed in such a small, stuffy area. And that's sort of what Truman aims to accomplish. He leaves for Palm Springs, where he gets busy with a handyman named Rick, rather than really becoming sober, claiming that he wants to sober up. A master manipulator, Capote even transports him back to the East, where CZ, Kate, and Jack are horrified by Rick's incapacity to have a meaningful conversation about anything but air conditioners. Considering that Capote's antagonistic relationship with Vidal, who he describes as an untalented hack of a writer, has only served to highlight his harshness. It's clear that he's clinging to modernity in an attempt to stay relevant. As CZ witnesses him slurring words on television and Jack notices he hasn't moved over the loss of his several swans, it becomes evident to them both that none of them can do much to truly assist him. If only he could just sit down and write. He's on yet another downward spiral. Unfortunately, an addict finds it difficult to overcome their disease and quickly finds themselves attempting to recover. He even finds a way to be okay with Rick leaving him in the end, but not before being needlessly cruel about it. He wants to spend time writing answered prayers again, get his doctor to tuck and plucked him in order to look younger, as required by a rapidly changing world obsessed with youth. Rick is waiting for him at the flat, his suitcase packed and ready to go back to Palm Springs. Truman is becoming older, alone, and going downhill. He is now unable to avoid writing. He settles in to wrap up his book, starting with the chapter Our Time. He writes about loneliness, losing friendships, and the agony of growing older. Truman and the Swans are coming to terms with their own mortality, growing older, and discovering what, in the end, makes life meaningful. At very least, the episode closes with him making one last effort to continue working on his Proustian project, a sort of fag retaliation against everyone who had initially supported and indulged him. It's a somber scene because, sitting at his desk, Capote might be realizing for the first time that the book he was writing was a eulogy for a bygone era. In his writing, friendships are compared to sun-dappled light on one's skin. The narrator of the story, who is lying in a hammock in Tangier with the scorching desert heat all about him, misses these friendships. The Easter bonnet story Capote had been considering earlier with CZ, a time when he and his swans could enjoy each other's company into a fit of chuckles while donning ludicrous hats, is edited into the scene by director Gus Van Sant, which heightens the grief of the moment. But none of that remains. Those friendships are no longer in the sun. It makes him and them even more stoic. I adore the notion that listening is the best way to retain poetry, much like Truman does. That's what he tells Kate while regaling her with passages from Lewis Carroll's The Walrus and the Carpenter. Go no farther than YouTube to watch Truman on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson if you'd like to witness footage of him slurring any time he appeared on late-night television in the 1970s. When CZ learns that her beloved millinery boutique is shutting, I can't be the only one who thought of Sonam's company. It was evident that Capote's swans were a disappearing breed years later when the question, "Does anyone still wear a hat?" was asked on the Broadway stage in 1970. Speaking of hat, 70 and Watts deserve Emmy Awards for their responses to their favorite department store discontinuing its glove department. My favorite vital passage from Capote's Women is what makes me unhappy that the show didn't include it. You see, behind his facade, he's really just a bowl of not quite congealed jello. As a writer, Capote has never been more relatable, especially as a homosexual man, than when he tells Kate that he's been writing and scribbling away while enjoying a drink at a Palm Springs pool.